Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Yaqin and we are from Group 11 for World History subject. So today we will be presenting about poster presentation, which is the Enlightenment. Next. So these are our group members, which is Ellya, Zaireen, Aisyah, Syahmienna, me, myself, Yaqin, and Siti, Khadijah. Next. So our poster focused on background and causes of the Enlightenment, key ideas of the Enlightenment, effects of the Enlightenment, and lastly, the Enlightenment thinkers. Next. So let's move on to the background and the causes of the Enlightenment. Next. So why I chose the rhetoric theory and the church, and that's something of the hand gesture, which is to denounce each other, the Protestant and Catholics as a follower of Satan's. Next. So, the Renaissance led to the scientific revolution. All of these periods are defined by a sense of inquiry or questioning or established to find better ways of doing things. What is scientific revolution? So scientists begin to question traditional belief and the use of logic, reason, observation, and experimentation. So British advocates of enlightenment grudgingly accepted that while logic could inform the reason, and rhetoric theory was necessary to rouse the will to action, and it defines a peculiar manner in which men express themselves by means of language. So between 1500 and 1007, European scientists used reason to discover natural laws. Next. So why I choose creative poster, which is the Renaissance was concerned with men's creativity, because some of them claim that humans were like God, created not only in his image but with a share of his creative power. So by exerting their intellectual powers, the painter, architect, musician, and scholar were fulfilling heavenly purposes. Next. So I choose political tolerance and religious harmony, as in the case in Catholic Enlightenment, which often involved an effort to free the church. However, Christians aim for unity, whether through combating the belief and practice the rival church or through mutual concession and doctrinal minimalism. So the Enlightenment as a whole was an effort to overcome the division created by the wars of religions. And in spite of this appearance, this view was frequently accompanied by a notable degree of self-criticism. Such was the case of in the Catholic Enlightenment, which often involved an effort to free the church. Next presenter, please.
Moving on to the key ideas of the Enlightenment. Next slide, please. Firstly, the reason why I choose this white or this grayish color for the background is because I want to fit in the main theme for our posters, since we have decided to go for vintage. Next, as you can see, there is a big picture of the head and an illustration of what things are inside it. This is to show that our minds are capable of restoring various types of information, whether it could be history, mathematics, or arts. Apart from that, I want to highlight that we should use our brain before making any further actions. Next slide, please. This is in line with one of the key ideas for the Enlightenment, which is reason. Next slide, please. Supernatural phenomena were often dismissed as pure superstition by the Enlightenment thinkers. This is when things get a little tricky. It is a common misconception that all Enlightenment philosophers were atheists. However, this was not the case. In fact, most of them was not. The Enlightenment sparked atheism to some extent, but it was more often associated with a blend of Christianity and scientific rationalism. The Deist movement that swept Europe and the United States in the late 18th century is the best example of this. Next is liberty. During the Enlightenment age, liberty became a distinct movement which made it popular among Western scholars. This main idea of this concept was to eliminate monarchy, traditional conservatism, and representative democracy. It is believed that natural rights of humans include liberty and happiness. Hence, happiness for all is possible, and happiness is not only something that we can achieve once we have entered heaven. We can find happiness even in simple things that are able to make us happy on earth. Furthermore, according to this period, philosophers believe individuals could seek perfection, and in return, society sought perfection, look at human beings as capable of progress. It is believed that one can improve themselves via education. All in all, these four components cannot be achieved if one does not use their mind wisely. Therefore, that is why I put a huge picture of a head and use "there is nothing sexier than intelligence" as a slogan on my poster, because one cannot simply gain whatever they want without using brains. Same goes to the people in this era, because they cannot use logic and science if they do not have any knowledge about it. Finally, it is a fact that a person looks more attractive when they are clever. Overall, I do not think people would love to listen to empty cans. Next presenter, please.
Moving on to the third point, which is the effect of the Enlightenment. Next. Here is the poster regarding to the point. The portrayal of a scientist used is to show the effort of seeking knowledge. And then the caption, "The blooms of the thinkers," highlighting to the most obvious impact of the Enlightenment when people start to prioritize education and explore new things. The trees next to the caption symbolize the growth and deep roots caused by the Enlightenment up until today. The poster will be presenting the effect of Enlightenment. Next point. Next slide, please. First, separation of power. This is a constitutional principle dividing three major government branches. It was brought by the French philosopher during the Enlightenment named Montesquieu. He believed that if all branches were held under single power, it would happen things such as dictatorship. Therefore, the three branches, executive, legislative, and judiciary, implemented will be ensured there were no overlap and there were no overlap in function, but a balance and check administration of the government. We can see this principle being applied by the US when the powers afforded to the US judicial, legislative, and executive branches are defined in its constitution. So the executive will be responsible for implementing and administrating the public. The legislative will be responsible for enacting the law of the state. The judiciary will be responsible for interpreting and applying laws. Executive will be put under the power of president. Legislative will be the control under the Congress, and judicial will put under the supervision of Supreme Court. Moving on to the next point. Which is rights of a man. First is natural rights. The Enlightenment effect assert that all men possess inalienable rights from God that entitle them to life, liberty, property, regardless to race, gender, and religion. Second is justice and fairness. Explore the ideas of right of people shall be applied and governed by state with just and fair manner. Third is gender equality, suggests that both men and women should be treated as rational beings. Lastly is women empowerment, proof that women can also be a good product of education and being the excellent educator, leader, and student. Up until today, thanks to the Enlightenment thinkers, we now have universal human rights and the law. One of the founding documents in human rights, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, emerged during the French Revolution, derived by the principle of the Enlightenment. And also, today we have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as an international document adopted by the United Nations to ensure the rights and freedom of all individuals. Moving on to the next point. So the last point is the growth of knowledge. The Enlightenment produced numerous books, essays, inventions, scientific discoveries, law, wars, revolution, and etc. For example, we can see the Newton's law of gravity and motion. Therefore, the literacy rate in Europe from 17th century to the 18th centuries can be seen grew significantly. The Enlightenment is also known for certain advancement in science, government, and society. Therefore, today we can enjoy the advance of astronomy, physics, and other educational fields. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Alright, so Assalamualaikum and have a good day. We're moving on to the expansion of the topic, which is the Enlightenment thinkers. Moving on to the poster. Apologies. Okay, so moving on to the poster, we decided to keep it very simple as our theme is vintage. So we decided to keep it very 1800-esque in the way it is laid out. So we can see three significant figures in the Enlightenment era, which brought change specifically in their own category, which is John Locke, which is the liberty of a human being, Voltaire, freedom of religion, and Mary Estelle, which is women's right. And their quotes reflect on what they have fought for. So going into who is or what is an Enlightenment thinker, mostly the Enlightenment thinkers come from a group of people called bourgeoisies, which is a middle class people with middle class work, nothing spectacular, but they are very well educated and thus have voiced out their questions concern for the truth during the Enlightenment era. So defining a philosopher, going in very, very briefly, the first and foremost, as my colleagues have mentioned, they advocate for science, rights, and truth, concerned with social solutions for social problems, intellectuals who discuss ideas. This is important because that's how they expand their perspective and expand their knowledge, because they are not satisfied with all ideas. Religion tolerance, and also use reason to explain the world, such as said before for my previous colleagues. Now, the philosophers despite three things. The first two would be absolute monarchy, which is the birth of a person would determine their rights to the kingdom and their divine right. So philosophers such as Montesquieu did not like absolute monarchy because again it will create an unfairness and unjustifiable reign, such as my colleague has said. Montesquieu has went and actually established a judicial constitution to make sure accountability and also fairness existed within the era. And then Catholic Church's abuse, such as mentioned before, religious tolerance was a big value in philosophers. Thus, they went against Catholic churches not only for their abuse of power, abuse of political, but also abuse of their superiority complex, thinking that if you are not Catholic or you are not Christian, then you are going to hell or you are less than human. And the last one would be land-owning nobles. Who are the land-owning nobles? Are basically nobles who own land but do not pay the taxes, even though they are very wealthy, unlike the philosophers or unlike the bourgeoisies who have mediocre jobs but still had to pay taxes. Now, going on to the four very significant figures of the Enlightenment period, such as mentioned before, John Locke. Why he is because he, aside from Sir Isaac Newton, was a founder or the father of Enlightenment, and he believed in equality and liberty. Voltaire, again, because religious freedom and tolerance was a significant part of Enlightenment. Montesquieu, because he had established a proper constitution for the era. And Rousseau, because again, he, such as John Locke, believed in the liberty and the freedom of man. And all of them have contributed in a sense of literature as well, such as Rousseau with his social contract, and also Montesquieu in his spirit of laws. So just to end it all, a quote from Immanuel Kant has actually, a German philosopher during this time as well, has actually urged a lot of people to have enlightenment, not in a sense that you must change the world, but also be your own, your own self, in your own self-caused state of minority, or against people who are superior in their own minds. So thank you for that. We have been group 2 on the Enlightenment presentation posters.